The silence in the war room was absolute. Not the comfortable quiet of a peaceful evening, but the heavy, suffocating silence that comes when predators realize they are no longer at the top of the food chain. Commander Vextar stood motionless, before the holographic display, his 6 eyes fixed on the frozen image that had changed everything. Around him, the elite council of the Kythera Empire, the most feared hunters in 3 galaxies, watched in stunned disbelief. "Play it again," Vextar commanded, his voice barely a whisper. Intelligence Officer Zirath hesitated. "Commander, we have already viewed the footage 17 times. Perhaps we should play it again." The hologram flickered to life, displaying a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Earth, the humans called it. For weeks, the Kythera had been preparing their invasion of this unremarkable planet. The species there seemed primitive, barely capable of interstellar travel. Their technology was crude, their military forces scattered across their single world like insects. It should have been simple. The Kythera had conquered over 200 worlds. They were master tacticians, bred for war across millennia. Their scales could deflect energy weapons, their claws could tear through steel, and their minds were honed for the kill. But then the intercepted transmission had arrived. The display showed grainy footage from what humans called World War II. Black and white images of their primitive aircraft, their explosive weapons, their ground forces. Vextar had initially dismissed it as historical curiosity. Ancient warfare from a species that had barely learned to fly. 10 minutes, that's all. It took 10 minutes of human warfare footage to shatter everything the Kythera believed about themselves. The first scene showed a human city under siege. The creatures, humans, were small, fragile-looking beings with soft skin and no natural weapons. They should have surrendered immediately when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they fought with a ferocity that made Vextar's blood run cold. The footage cut to scenes of humans charging across open ground toward certain death, their faces twisted not with fear but with rage. Their weapons were primitive by Kythera standards, yet they wielded them with terrifying efficiency. They built massive machines of war, then threw themselves at enemies who outnumbered them 10 to 1. But it wasn't the weapons that terrified the Kythera Council. It was something else entirely. "Pause there," Vextar commanded. The image froze on a human soldier, barely more than a juvenile by their species' standards. He was surrounded, outnumbered, wounded. By all logic, he should have fled or surrendered. Instead, he was smiling. "This cannot be accurate," growled War Chief Thane from the back of the chamber. "No species fights with such madness," suggested Zirath quietly. "No," Vextar corrected, his voice heavy with a realization that chilled him to his core. Joy. The assembled Kythera shifted uncomfortably. In their empire, war was business. Calculated, efficient, profitable. They conquered because it served their interests, expanded their territory, increased their resources. It was logical, methodical, clean. These humans fought differently. "Continue the playback," Vextar ordered. The scenes that followed defied everything the Kythera understood about warfare. Humans throwing themselves on explosives to save their comrades. Pilots deliberately crashing their aircraft into enemy vessels. Soldiers fighting hand-to-hand against impossible odds, laughing as they died. One particular scene made several council members physically recoil. A human settlement was under attack by what appeared to be an overwhelming force. The logical response would be evacuation or surrender. Instead, the humans, including their non-combatants, their elderly, even their young, took up weapons and fought with a desperate fury that turned the tide of battle. "They fight harder when they're losing," observed tactical analyst Korn, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The more hopeless their situation becomes, the more dangerous they become." Vextar nodded grimly. "And this footage is from their primitive period, before they developed space travel, before they learned to split the atom, before they discovered technologies we would consider advanced." The implications hung in the air like a toxic gas. Zirath cleared her throat nervously. "Commander, our Scouts report that human military technology has advanced considerably since these historical records. Their current weapon systems are concerning. Show me. The hologram shifted to display more recent intelligence. Modern human warfare was a symphony of controlled destruction that made the Kithera's most advanced tactics look clumsy by comparison. Weapons that could level cities, vehicles that moved faster than thought, soldiers enhanced with technology that bordered on the supernatural. But the technology wasn't what made Vextar's hands tremble. It was the fact that underneath all that advancement, the humans were still the same species that had fought with sticks and stones in that terrifying, incomprehensible joy in battle. They've been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history, Zirith reported, her voice growing quieter with each word. Not just external enemies, but each other. They've never known peace for more than a few decades at a time. They've turned warfare into an art form, a science, a religion. War Chief Thane stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the display. Then we adapt our tactics. We've faced fierce species before. Have we? Vextar asked softly. When we conquered the militant worlds of Torth, they fought bravely but logically. When we faced the warrior clans of Vex Prime, they were honorable opponents who understood when to yield. But these humans, he gestured at the frozen image of the smiling soldier. These humans don't understand the concept of impossible odds. To them, being outnumbered isn't a reason to surrender, it's a reason to fight harder. The chamber fell silent again. Outside, the vast Kithera war fleet hung in space, thousands of ships equipped with weapons that could crack planets. The most powerful military force in known space, led by beings who had never known defeat. For the first time in their history, the Kithera were afraid. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the command ship. Emergency lights bathed the war room in pulsing red as communications officers rushed to their stations. "Commander," called out Communications Chief Vorth, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. It's being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously." Vextar felt his heart skip a beat. "Impossible. Our fleet is still 3 days from Earth. They shouldn't even know we're here." "Sir, the transmission is directed specifically at us. They're using our own communication protocols." The holographic display flickered, then resolved into the image of a human. The creature was smaller than Vextar had expected, with graying, hair and lines around its eyes that spoke of age and experience. It wore what appeared to be a military uniform, but carried itself with casual confidence that set every instinct in Vextar's body screaming. When the human spoke, its voice was calm, almost conversational. "Greetings to the Kithera Empire fleet, currently approaching our solar system. My name is Admiral Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Defense Coalition. We've been monitoring your approach for the past several weeks." Several council members hissed in shock. Weeks? They had been detected weeks ago? The human continued, apparently unaware of, or perhaps indifferent to, the panic she was causing. "We understand you have a reputation as fierce warriors, and we respect that. Earth has studied your previous conquests, and we must admit, your tactical abilities are impressive. However, we feel there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of your intended visit to our world." Admiral Chen paused, and for a moment Vextar caught something in her expression that made his blood freeze. It was the same look he had seen in the historical footage. Not fear, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Anticipation. "You see," the human continued, "we've had some time to prepare for your arrival, and while we're always happy to meet new neighbors in the galaxy, we wanted to make sure you understand exactly what you're dealing with here." The transmission cut to what appeared to be live footage from Earth's surface. Massive installations of weapons, unlike anything in the Kithera database. Ships that seemed to bend space around them. Soldiers moving with enhanced speed and precision that defied biology. But it wasn't the weapons that made Vextar step backward. It was the humans operating them. They were smiling. All of them. The transmission returned to Admiral Chen. "We thought you might appreciate a demonstration of our current defensive capabilities. Consider it a professional courtesy, one military force to another. What happened next would be seared into Vextar's memory for the rest of his life. The display showed space around Earth's moon. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, without warning, 3 asteroids that had been drifting in stable orbit for millennia simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no debris. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, replaced by expanding clouds of perfectly dissociated atoms. Our defensive grid is fully operational. Admiral Chen's voice continued cheerfully. Range approximately 50,000 kilometers. We thought you should know before you got too close. The transmission ended, leaving the Kythera war room in absolute silence. 50,000 kilometers. The Kythera fleet was currently 55,000 kilometers from Earth. Commander, whispered Zirath, what are your orders? Vextar stared at the empty holographic display, his mind racing through calculations he didn't want to complete. The humans had detected them weeks ago. They had weapons that could disintegrate matter at impossible ranges, and if their historical footage was any indication, they were about to face an enemy that fought hardest when cornered. Signal the fleet, he said finally. All ships are to maintain current distance and defensive positions. Sir? War Chief, Thane stepped forward. Surely you're not suggesting we retreat from these primitive mammals. Vextar turned to face his war council, and for the first time in his career as a military commander, he felt the weight of absolute uncertainty. Tell me, War Chief, he said quietly. In all our conquests, have we ever faced an enemy that smiled when they prepared to die? Thane opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Have we ever encountered a species that considers being outnumbered an advantage? That treats warfare not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself? The silence stretched until it became painful. Then perhaps, Vextar concluded, it's time we learned more about these humans before we decide whether conquest is advisable. As if summoned by his words, another transmission request appeared on the communications console. This time, it was coming from inside their own fleet. Chapter 2. The Infiltration. The second transmission sent shockwaves through the Kythera command structure that dwarfed even their initial horror at human warfare footage. This is Captain Marcus Rivera. Of the Earth vessel, Prometheus, came a voice speaking perfect Kytheric, the language of the Empire. I'm currently aboard your flagship. Would it be possible to arrange a meeting? Every Kythera in the war room spun to stare at the communications console as if it had grown a second head. Security Chief Gorth immediately activated internal scanners, his claws clicking frantically across the control interface. Impossible, he growled. Our shields are at full strength. No vessel could have docked without triggering every alarm in the fleet. Maybe he didn't dock, suggested Zirath, her voice barely above a whisper. The implications of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. If the human hadn't docked, then he had somehow penetrated not just their shields, but their hull itself, without detection, while they were at battle stations and full alert. Commander Vextar, the human voice continued conversationally, I'm currently in what I believe you call the guest quarters on Deck 7. I've taken the liberty of making some tea. I hope you don't mind. Gorth's scanners finally locked onto the signal source. Deck 7, Section 12, he reported, his voice tight with disbelief. The readings are unusual. Unusual how? Vextar demanded. The biosignature doesn't match any known species profile. It's as if the being exists, in a state of constant flux. Our sensors can detect something is there, but they cannot determine what it is. Vextar felt the familiar chill of encountering something beyond his understanding. In 600 years of military service, he had faced energy beings, shapeshifters, and creatures that existed partially outside normal spacetime. But this was different. This felt less like advanced biology, and more like advanced technology made indistinguishable from magic. Shall I dispatch security teams? Asked Gorth. Captain Rivera. Vextar spoke directly to the communications console. Are you armed? A pause, then what sounded distinctly like human laughter. Commander, I'm a human, we're always armed, but I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk. About what? About the fundamental misunderstanding that's about to get a lot of people killed, unnecessarily. Vextar exchanged glances with his counsel. Everything about this situation violated protocol, logic, and basic military sense. But the alternative, proceeding without understanding what they were truly facing, seemed infinitely worse. Very well, Captain Rivera. You have 10 minutes. I appreciate that, Commander. But I should mention, I'm not alone. Before anyone could respond, new voices began speaking from communication stations throughout the ship. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okafor, currently in your main engine room. The quantum resonance patterns on your drive system are fascinating, by the way. Sergeant First Class Chen Wei, checking out your weapons bay. I have to say, the energy, efficiency on these plasma cannons is impressive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, currently in your medical facility. Your surgical robots are definitely more advanced than ours. Major James McCready in your tactical center. Hope you don't mind if I borrow some of your star charts. The voices continued, each reporting from a different critical system throughout the flagship. Humans were everywhere, speaking calmly as if they were tourists on a guided tour, rather than infiltrators who had somehow materialized inside the most secure vessel in the Kithara fleet. Gorth's security console lit up like a festival display as scanners detected human biosignatures throughout the ship. Commander, there are at least 20 of them. They're in every major system. Engineering, weapons control, life support, navigation. How? War Chief Thane's voice was a barely controlled roar. How is this possible? Captain Rivera's voice answered as if he had heard the question. Well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. You see, you've been operating under some incorrect assumptions about human capabilities. A new holographic display activated in the center of the war room. Instead of the strategic displays they were accustomed to, it showed what appeared to be a comfortable lounge. A human male sat in what looked like a perfectly normal chair, holding a steaming cup of some beverage. He was wearing a dark uniform, with insignia that meant nothing to the Kithara, but his relaxed posture spoke of complete confidence. What was most unsettling was how ordinary he looked. Average height, unremarkable features, the kind of being you would pass without notice in any civilized spaceport. Nothing about his appearance suggested he possessed the capability to penetrate their defenses as if they didn't exist. You've been studying our historical military footage, Captain Rivera continued, taking a sip from his cup. Which is good. It shows you're thorough, but I think you may have missed some important context. What context? Vextar asked, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. The footage you've been analyzing shows humans fighting other humans. The statement hung in the air for a moment before its full implications began to sink in. You see, Rivera continued, every tactic you observed, every innovation in warfare, every demonstration of what you call impossible determination, all of that was developed fighting against opponents who think exactly like we do, who are just as creative, just as ruthless, just as unwilling to give up. He set down his cup and leaned forward slightly. We've spent 10,000 years in an arms race against ourselves. Every weapon we build, every defense we develop, every strategy we create, we do it knowing that somewhere else on our planet other humans are working just as hard to find ways to defeat it. Sirath spoke quietly. An evolutionary pressure toward military innovation. Exactly, Rivera nodded approvingly. Most species develop their military capabilities in response to external threats. Predators, environmental dangers, hostile neighbors. But humans, we are our own hostile neighbors. We've been beta testing our military technology against opponents who understand our psychology perfectly. The hologram shifted to show images from Earth's surface. Not weapons or soldiers, but something far more disturbing. Cities. Massive, gleaming metropolises that spoke of a technological civilization at its peak. This is Earth today, Rivera explained. Population 12 billion. No poverty, no resource scarcity, no territorial conflicts. We've solved every problem that typically leads to warfare. Then why? Vextar asked slowly. Do you still prepare for war? Rivera's smile was almost sad. Because we know ourselves, Commander. We know that somewhere in the galaxy, we're going to meet another species that thinks conquest is a reasonable solution to their problems. And when that happens, we want to be ready. The display changed again, showing orbital installations around Earth that made the Kythera's most advanced shipyards look primitive by comparison. The weapons we demonstrated earlier, the ones that disintegrated those asteroids, those are our defensive systems, non-lethal, designed for minimum collateral damage, warning shots. Non-lethal? War Chief Thane sputtered. You turned 3 asteroids into atomic dust. Well, yes, Rivera admitted. But we didn't turn them into black holes, or antimatter, or temporal paradoxes. We try to keep our demonstrations proportional. The casual mention of weaponizing black holes and time itself sent a collective shudder through the Kythera Council. Which brings me to why I'm here, Rivera continued. Admiral Chen wanted me to extend an invitation. An invitation? To dinner. The silence that followed was so complete that the hum of the ship's life support system sounded like thunder. Dinner? Vextar repeated weakly. Well, diplomatic reception, technically. Tomorrow evening, Earth Standard Time. The Admiral thought it might be nice to meet face-to-face, discuss mutual interests, maybe find some common ground. Rivera's image stood up from his chair, straightening his uniform. We've prepared a small demonstration of human culture, music, art, food, that sort of thing. We thought you might enjoy seeing what we're like when we're not, planning ways to kill each other. He paused and his expression became more serious. Commander, humanity has been watching the Kythera Empire for several years now. We know about your conquests, your tactics, your reputation. And we respect your capabilities, but we also know that you're reasonable beings. You conquer because it serves your interests, not because you enjoy causing suffering. The human took a step closer to whatever recording device was transmitting his image. So here's what we propose. Come to dinner. Meet us as people, not as targets. See what human civilization is really like, and then decide whether conquest is really in your best interests. And if we refuse? Asked War Chief Thane. Rivera's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that reminded Vextar uncomfortably of the expression he had seen in the historical footage. Then you refuse, Rivera said simply. We're not going to force you to attend a dinner party, War Chief. That would be incredibly rude. But the unspoken continuation of that statement hung in the air like a blade. They wouldn't force the Kythera to attend dinner, but they had already demonstrated what they could do to beings who weren't interested in peaceful solutions. I'll need to discuss this with my council, Vextar said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. Oh, and Commander? Yes? The other members of my team will be leaving your ship now. Thank you for your hospitality. Before anyone could respond, Gorth's security console showed the human biosignatures throughout the ship simply vanishing, not moving toward exits or transport points, just disappearing, as if they had never been there at all. The holographic display flickered and went dark, leaving the Kythera Council alone with their thoughts and a growing certainty that they were dealing with something far beyond their experience. Options? Vextar asked quietly. We could attempt to bombard their planet from maximum range, suggested Thane. Our weapons have greater reach than 50,000 kilometers. Do they? Asked Zeroth pointedly. A few hours ago, we thought our stealth systems made us undetectable. We thought our shields were impenetrable. We thought our military might was unmatched. She gestured at the empty space where Rivera's image had been. Now we know that humans have been watching us for years without our knowledge, that they can appear and disappear inside our most secure vessels at will, that their defensive weapons can disintegrate matter at impossible ranges. What are you suggesting? Thane growled. I'm suggesting, Zeroth replied carefully, that we may not know what their actual offensive capabilities are. Those asteroids they destroyed? Captain Rivera called that a warning shot, a proportional response. The implications sank in slowly. You think they're holding back, Vextar said. I think, Zeroth replied, that we've only seen what they want us to see. and what they want us to see is enough to make the most powerful military force in the galaxy hesitate. Vextar looked around, at his council. These were beings who had conquered star systems, who had faced down impossible odds and emerged victorious. They were predators at the apex of the galactic food chain, and for the first time in their collective memory, they were genuinely uncertain about their chances in a fight. Signal the fleet, Vextar decided. We maintain position and defensive stance. Tomorrow I will attend this dinner party. Sir? Thane looked alarmed. Surely you don't intend to place yourself at their mercy. War Chief, Vextar replied tiredly. I think we've been at their mercy since the moment we entered their solar system. The question now is whether they plan to extend any to us. As if summoned by his words, the communications console chimed with an incoming message. This time, it was from Admiral Chen herself. Commander Vextar, I hope Captain Rivera's visit was informative. I wanted to personally extend our invitation to tomorrow's reception. We're very much looking forward to meeting you. Her image appeared briefly on the display, and Vextar was struck by how genuinely pleased she looked. Not triumphant, not threatening, just happy at the prospect of meeting new people. Oh, and Commander, bring your whole council. We've prepared enough food for everyone. See you tomorrow. The transmission ended, leaving the Kythera command, staff staring at each other in bewilderment. They want to feed us, Gorth said slowly, as if testing the words for hidden meanings. It appears so, Vextar confirmed. Outside the command ship's viewports, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, looking peaceful and welcoming and utterly non-threatening, which, given everything they had learned in the past few hours, might be the most terrifying thing of all. Chapter 3. The Dinner. The transport shuttle provided by the humans was unlike anything in the Kythera fleet. It seemed to be constructed from materials that existed in a constant state of semi-transparency, giving the impression of traveling inside a soap bubble made of starlight. The propulsion system was completely silent and apparently gravity-based, manipulating space-time itself to move through the void. Commander Vextar sat rigid in his designated seat, acutely aware that he was placing his life and the lives of his senior staff entirely in human hands. War Chief Thane had protested the decision violently, pointing out that this could be an elaborate trap. Intelligence Officer Xerath had compiled 17 different scenarios in which the dinner invitation was a prelude to execution, interrogation, or psychological warfare. But Vextar had made his choice based on a simple, terrifying realization. If the humans wanted them dead, they would already be dead. The pilot was another unremarkable-looking human, a female with short dark hair and the kind of easy competence that spoke of absolute mastery of her craft. She had introduced herself as Lieutenant Torres and spent the journey pointing out various features of Earth's defensive network with the casual enthusiasm of a tour guide. Those platforms you can see orbiting the moon are our early warning systems, she explained cheerfully. They can detect and track objects as small as a marble from about a light year away. The big installations on the far side are the manufacturing centers where we build our exploration vessels. Exploration vessels? Asked Xerath, making notes on a small recording device. Oh yes, we've got about 15,000 ships out there, mapping the galaxy, making contact with new species, that sort of thing. Nothing military, just scientific and diplomatic missions. 15,000 ships. The entire Kythera battle fleet consisted of 8,000 vessels, and that represented the accumulated military might of their entire empire built up over centuries. How long have humans been conducting interstellar exploration? Vextar asked. Let's see, Miss, we achieved faster-than-light travel about 60 years ago, I think. The first exploration missions launched maybe 50 years back. Captain Rivera would know the exact dates. He was on one of the early expeditions. Torres spoke as if 50 years of interstellar civilization was a brief recent development. The Kythera had been a spacefaring species for over 3 millennia. Your technological advancement rate appears to be rapid, Vextar observed carefully. Oh, that's just humanity for you, Torres laughed. We get bored easily. Once we figured out how to build one starship, someone immediately started working on building a better starship. Then someone else started working on building a completely different kind of starship. Before you know it, you've got 15 different, competing designs and everybody's trying to prove theirs is best. Do you not have standardized designs? Centralized manufacturing? Well, sure, for basic stuff. But innovation comes from people trying crazy new ideas. High command figured out a long time ago that the best way to get breakthrough technology is to give smart people resources and then get out of their way. Torres gestured toward a massive orbital structure that was slowly rotating around Earth's equator. See that ring? That's New Singapore. About 50 million people live there, and the whole habitat is basically one giant research and development center. They compete with the Mars colonies, who compete with the Europa stations, who compete with the asteroid belt miners. Everybody's trying to build the next great thing. The casual mention of 50 million humans living in space, just one of apparently many such habitats, sent another chill through Vextar's understanding of what they were dealing with. The entire Kythera homeworld had a population of only 30 million. How many humans are there? Asked Xerath quietly. Total population? I think we hit about 20 billion last year. Maybe 25 billion if you count the generation ships. Generation ships? Long-range colony expeditions. We've got about 100 of them heading toward distant star systems, each carrying maybe 1 million people. They won't reach their destinations for centuries, but hey, patience is a virtue, right? 100 million humans, scattered across the galaxy in self-sufficient vessels, each one potentially carrying the seeds of new human civilizations. It was a level of expansion that made the Kythera Empire's conquests look like a child's game. The shuttle began its descent toward Earth's surface, and Vexitar got his first close look at human civilization. The cities were unlike anything he had ever seen. Vast, gleaming metropolises that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, connected by transportation networks that pulsed with constant movement. Everything was integrated, efficient, and beautiful in a way that spoke of a species that had learned to live in harmony with their environment. "Where are your military installations?" asked War Chief Thane, scanning the landscape below. "What, military installations?" Torres asked, genuinely confused. "Your weapons factories, training grounds, fortifications? Oh, those are all off-world. We don't keep military hardware on Earth itself. Too much risk of accidents. All the actual military stuff is based on Luna, Mars, or the outer system. Platforms." Thane exchanged a look with Vextar. Earth itself was completely demilitarized, defended only by orbital installations. It suggested a level of confidence that bordered on arrogance, or a level of capability that made ground-based defenses unnecessary. The shuttle touched down at what Torres described as a small reception facility, but which looked to Vextar like a palace. The architecture was flowing and organic, incorporating living plants and water features into the structure itself. Everything was designed on a scale that accommodated both human proportions and larger visitors. Clearly, the humans were experienced at hosting alien species. Admiral Chen was waiting for them at the entrance, accompanied by a small group of other humans in what appeared to be dress uniforms. She stepped forward as the Kythera delegation emerged from their shuttle, her hands empty and her posture open and welcoming. "Commander Vextar, welcome to Earth. I'm Sarah Chen, and I'm delighted you could join us." Up close, the human admiral was even more disconcerting than she had appeared in the transmissions. She was small, probably not even reaching Vextar's shoulder, and appeared to be well into middle age by human standards. Nothing about her suggested the kind of military genius capable of orchestrating the demonstration they had witnessed. "Admiral," Vextar replied formally, "thank you for your invitation. Please, just Sarah. We're not standing on ceremony tonight." She gestured toward the building. "I hope you're hungry. Our chef has prepared what I'm told is a spectacular fusion of Earth cuisines. We weren't sure about Kythera dietary requirements, so we tried to cover all the basic nutritional categories." As they walked through the entrance, Vextar was struck by the casual nature of the human security arrangements. There were no visible guards, no weapons scanners, no defensive positions. Either the humans were remarkably trusting, or they were so confident in their capabilities that they saw no need for obvious precautions. The reception hall was filled with humans from what appeared to be every level of their society. Military officers mingled with civilians, scientists chatted with artists, and children ran around between the adults with the kind of casual freedom that spoke of a society completely at peace with itself. "Is this a typical human gathering?" asked Zirath. "Pretty much," replied Sarah. "We thought you might like to meet regular people, not just military personnel. Get a sense of what human civilization is actually like." She led them toward a group of humans who were examining what appeared to be artistic displays, three-dimensional sculptures that moved and changed as they watched. Dr. Martinez here is one of our leading xenobiologists. She's been studying Kythera physiology based on the biological samples you've left on various worlds. Fascinating metabolic adaptations, apparently. Dr. Martinez, an elderly human with silver hair and bright, curious eyes, stepped forward eagerly. "Commander Vextar, what an honor to meet you. I've been dying to ask, is it true that your species can photosynthesize directly through your scales? The implications for long-duration space travel would be extraordinary." The question was so unexpected, so genuinely scientific rather than military, that Vextar found himself answering almost automatically. In emergency situations, yes. Our scales can convert certain wavelengths of light into usable energy, though not efficiently enough for sustained nutrition. Fascinating. That suggests your evolutionary history includes extended periods in low-resource environments, probably asteroid habitats or generation ships, I would guess. As Dr. Martinez launched into an enthusiastic discussion of comparative evolutionary biology, Vextar realized that this human had studied his species not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a scientific curiosity to be understood. Her questions were informed, intelligent, and completely non-threatening, which was in its own way more unsettling than any military interrogation would have been. "Sarah," War Chief Thane interrupted, "may I ask you a direct question?" "Of course. What do you want from us?" The human admiral considered the question seriously, then smiled. "Honestly? We'd like to be friends. The galaxy is a big place and there's room for everyone. We figure two civilizations as advanced as ours could probably find ways to help each other." "Help each other how?" "Well, you've got experience with interstellar governance that we lack. Managing an empire across multiple star systems is something we're still figuring out, and we have technologies that might be useful to you. Medical advances, manufacturing techniques, agricultural improvements." She gestured around the room, where humans and the few Kythera were mingling with easy familiarity. "Plus, it's just more interesting to have neighbors to talk to." "And if we're not interested in friendship?" Thane pressed. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. The same look Captain Rivera had shown during his shipboard visit. "Then, that would be unfortunate," she said quietly. "But we'd respect your decision." "Would you?" "War Chief, let me ask you something. In all your conquests, have you ever encountered a species that could have destroyed you but chose not to?" Thane hesitated. "No." "Then you understand the position we're in. We could end this conflict before it begins. Our defensive systems could disable your entire fleet without loss of life. Our infiltration capabilities could capture your leadership without firing a shot. Our manufacturing capacity could build a response fleet that would make your armada look like a handful of toys." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "But we don't want to do any of those things. We'd rather have dinner and talk about art and science and the things that make civilization worth preserving." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a human child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old by their species' development standards. She tugged on Admiral Chen's uniform, sleeve with the fearless confidence that only children possess. "Aunt Sarah, Mom says dinner is ready, and she wants to know if the lizard people eat dessert." The lizard people appeared to be the child's innocent description of the Kythera delegation. Admiral Chen smiled and knelt down to the child's level. "Emma, these are our guests, the Kythera. Commander Vextar, I'd like you to meet my niece, Emma Chen." The child studied Vextar with the frank curiosity of youth, apparently completely unafraid of beings who could tear her apart with their bare hands. "You're really tall," she observed, "and your scales are pretty. Do they change colors?" "In certain Lighting conditions, yes, Vextar found himself replying, bemused by the encounter. Cool. Mom's made chocolate cake for dessert. Do you like chocolate? Before Vextar could respond, Emma had moved on to examine Xerath's equipment harness with the same fearless interest. What's this thing? Is it a computer? Can it play games? The sight of a human child treating armed alien invaders is interesting. New Playmates was perhaps the most effective demonstration of human confidence Vextar had yet witnessed. These people were so secure in their safety that they allowed their young to approach potential enemies without concern. Admiral Chen guided them toward the dining area, where tables had been arranged to accommodate both human and Kithara physiology. The meal that followed was unlike anything Vextar had experienced in decades of diplomatic functions. The food was extraordinary, a fusion of flavors and textures that somehow managed to appeal to both human and Kithara palates. But more than that, the conversation was genuine. Humans asked questions about Kithara culture, art, philosophy, and history, with the kind of deep interest that suggested they actually cared about the answers. Dr. Martinez discussed evolutionary biology with Xerath. A human engineer named Rodriguez compared notes with War Chief Thane about the challenges of maintaining complex machinery in space. A human artist showed Vextar himself a holographic sculpture that incorporated mathematical principles from Kithara aesthetic philosophy. It was the most civilized evening Vextar had experienced in years, which made what happened next even more shocking. The attack came without warning. One moment they were discussing the philosophical implications of interstellar communication. The next moment, alarms were sounding throughout the facility. Admiral, Vextar said urgently, the Veltar are not like us. They don't negotiate, they don't honor agreements, and they don't take prisoners. You need to evacuate your population immediately. That's very kind of you to be concerned, Sarah replied, but I think we can handle 3 ships. 3 ships with singularity weapons, War Chief Thane emphasized. They could destroy this entire planet. Yes, they could, Sarah agreed. Emma, sweetheart, would you and the other children please go to the safe room? The adults need to take care of some business. The human child nodded and began shepherding the younger attendees toward what Vextar assumed were emergency shelters. But there was no panic, no fear. The humans around them continued their conversations with only mild interest in the developing crisis. Admiral, Vextar pressed, you don't understand. The Veltar have destroyed entire civilizations. He was interrupted by Captain Rivera's voice coming through the communication system. Sarah, we've got the Veltar ships on sensors. Want me to handle this, or would you prefer to do it personally? What are our options? She asked. Well, we could disable their weapons and engines, capture the crews for trial, or we could send them a strongly worded message and let them leave. Or, Rivera paused. Given that they just threatened to commit genocide against 20 billion people, we could exercise our right to self-defense. Admiral Chen glanced at the Kithara delegation, then at her own people, who were watching with the calm interest of spectators at a sporting event. Let's go with option 1. Capture them for trial, but make sure they understand that threatening Earth's population is considered extremely rude. Copy that. Engaging now. What followed was visible through the reception hall's transparent ceiling. 3 dark shapes appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, their weapons charging with the distinctive glow of singularity warheads. For a moment they hung in space like harbingers of apocalypse. Then, without any visible response from Earth, the 3 Veltar ships simply stopped. Not destroyed, not exploded. They just ceased all movement, hanging motionless in space as if time itself had been suspended around them. What did you do to them? Asked Xerath, staring upward in amazement. Temporal stasis field, Rivera's voice explained casually. We've locked them in a bubble of slowed time. From their perspective, they're still moving normally. But from our perspective, they're frozen. We'll collect them later for processing. Temporal manipulation, War Chief Thane whispered. That's theoretical technology. No one has actually managed to weaponize time distortion. Well, Admiral Chen said, settling back into her chair, we did mention that humans get bored easily. Someone was bound to figure out how to build a time weapon eventually. She turned to address her guest with the same gracious hospitality she had shown all evening. Now, where were we? Oh yes, Dr. Martinez was explaining her theory about convergent evolution in carbon-based life forms. I believe she was about to discuss the implications for interspecies communication. The casual dismissal of what should have been a civilization-ending threat was more terrifying than any display of military might. The humans had just neutralized 3 warships armed with planet-killing weapons, and they were treating it as a minor interruption to dinner conversation. How? Vextar asked quietly. How is this possible? Admiral Chen looked genuinely confused by the question. How is what possible, Commander? This. All of this. The technology, the capabilities, He gestured helplessly around the room. Your entire civilization. 50 years ago, you were confined to a single planet. Now you're manipulating time itself as a defensive measure. Oh, that, Sarah nodded. Well, like I said, we get bored easily. And we've had some very good teachers. Teachers? Other species we've encountered in our explorations. The Zenthari taught us about energy manipulation. The collective showed us how to integrate biological and mechanical systems. The ethereals helped us understand dimensional physics. She paused, sipping from her drink. Most species are happy to share knowledge with people who approach them as friends rather than conquerors. It's amazing how much you can learn when you're genuinely interested in other cultures. The implications were staggering. While the Kithra had spent centuries building an empire through conquest, the humans had spent decades building a civilization through cooperation. They had accumulated the knowledge and friendship of dozens of species, each contributing to humanity's rapid advancement. But, surely, War Chief Thane protested, some species must have been hostile, some must have refused cooperation. Admiral Chen's expression grew more serious. Yes, some have. The Devourers tried to harvest our colonies for biological resources. The hive mind attempted to assimilate our outer settlements. The hegemony, well, you just saw how we deal with the hegemony. What happened to the others? The Devourers and the hive mind? The Devourers learned that humans are very bad at being prey. We taught them to find alternative food sources. The hive mind discovered that trying to absorb human consciousness into a collective intelligence has some unexpected side effects, which were. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. Let's just say that adding human creativity and stubbornness to a hive mind doesn't create a more efficient collective. It creates chaos. They've been in therapy ever since. As the evening continued, Vexitar began to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species with advanced technology. They were the focal point of an informal alliance that spanned dozens of civilizations, each contributing knowledge and resources to their mutual benefit. The humans had turned cooperation into a strategic advantage that made conquest not just unnecessary, but counterproductive. When the formal dinner finally concluded, Admiral Chen walked the Kythera delegation back to their shuttle. The Veltar ships were still visible overhead, frozen in their temporal prison like insects in amber. Commander, she said as they reached the transport, I hope tonight has been informative. It has been enlightening, Vextar admitted. Good. I want you to understand that everything you've seen tonight, the technology, the cooperation, the defensive capabilities, all of it exists because we chose to build something rather than take something. She gestured toward the stars. The galaxy is vast enough for everyone, Commander. There's no need for conquest when there's so much to discover, so much to build, so much to learn. And if we choose a different path? Asked War Chief Thane. Admiral, Chen looked at him with genuine sadness. Then you choose a different path, but you'll be choosing it alone, War Chief. And in a galaxy full of friends and allies and cooperative species, being alone is a very dangerous place to be. The shuttle ride back to the Kythera flagship was conducted in complete silence. Each member of the delegation was lost in thought, processing what they had experienced and trying to understand its implications for their empire and their future. It wasn't until they were back aboard their own vessel that anyone spoke. Orders, Commander? Asked Zirath quietly. Vextar looked out at the viewports where Earth hung like a jewel against the stars. Beautiful, peaceful, and protected by technologies that made his empire's military might look primitive by comparison. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "We're returning home." "Sir?" War Chief Thane looked shocked. "Without conquest? Without tribute? We came here to expand the empire." "No, Thane," Vextar replied quietly. "We came here thinking we were apex predators. We've learned that we're not." He turned to face his senior staff. "We've also learned that there's another way to be strong. Not through conquest, but through cooperation. Not through fear, but through friendship." "You're talking about abandoning everything our civilization stands for," Thane protested. "Am I? Or am I talking about evolving beyond what our civilization has been toward what it could become?" Vexitar activated the ship's communication system, opening a channel to the entire fleet. "All vessels, this is Commander Vexitar. We are departing this system immediately. Our mission parameters have changed." As the Kythera fleet began its journey home, Vextar remained on the bridge, staring back at the blue world that had shattered everything he thought he knew about power, strength, and what it meant to be truly dangerous. The humans had shown him something that would haunt his dreams for years to come. A species that was utterly deadly but chose to be kind, that could destroy civilizations but preferred to build them, that had evolved beyond the need for conquest and discovered something far more powerful. They had discovered how to make friends, and in a galaxy full of potential allies, that made them the most dangerous species of all. Chapter 4. The Choice. 3 months after the Kythera fleets returned to their home system, Commander Vextar stood before the Y. The assembly hall was vast, carved from living rock deep beneath the surface of Kytheros Prime, the ancient homeworld of their species. Thousands of Kythera filled the terraced galleries, their scales gleaming in the bioluminescent light. These were the leaders of their empire. Military commanders, planetary governors, trade masters, and the ancient council of elders who had guided their species for millennia. At the center of the hall, on the pedestal of truth, Vextar stood alone. Above him, holographic displays showed images from Earth, recordings of human technology, and tactical analyses that had taken his staff months to compile. "Honored Assembly," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I stand before you to report on our mission to the Sol system, and to present recommendations that will determine the future course of our empire." Elder Prime Korthon, ancient even by Kythera standards, leaned forward on his seat of power. "Commander Vextar, your preliminary reports have been disturbing. You claim that a species barely 50 years into space travel has achieved technological superiority over our empire. This seems unlikely." "With respect, Elder Prime, I claim something far more significant than technological superiority." Vextar activated the holographic displays, showing the footage that had started everything, the human warfare videos that had first shaken their confidence. "I claim that we have encountered a species that has evolved beyond our understanding of warfare itself." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the images played. The same scenes that had terrified the War Council months earlier now had the same effect on the gathered leadership of the Empire. "This footage shows humans fighting other humans," Vextar continued. "Every tactic, every innovation, every demonstration of strategic thinking you observe was developed in conflicts against opponents who think exactly like they do. They have spent 10,000 years in an evolutionary arms race against themselves." War Master Thekran, leader of the Second Fleet, rose from his seat. "Commander, even if we accept that these humans are formidable opponents, surely the combined might of our empire could overcome a single world?" "War Master," Vextar replied, "that single world has a population of 20 billion. They have colonies throughout their star system, with another 5 billion humans living in space habitats. They have exploration fleets numbering in the thousands, and generation ships carrying millions more toward distant systems." The numbers sent a ripple of unease through the assembly. "But more importantly," Vextar continued, "they are not alone. The display shifted to show star charts, trade routes, and diplomatic connections that the humans had shared during their dinner conversation. In the 50 years since achieving interstellar travel, humanity has established formal alliances with over 30 spacefaring civilizations. They have mutual defense treaties, technology sharing agreements, and cultural exchange programs spanning hundreds of star systems. Elder Prime Corthon's eyes narrowed. You're saying they have built an alliance network. I'm saying they have built something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary confederation based on mutual benefit and shared knowledge rather than conquest and subjugation. Vexitar gestured to the display, which now showed the scope of human influence across the galaxy. The Zenthari Collective shares their energy manipulation technology with humans in exchange for human medical advances. The ethereal consciousness provides dimensional physics knowledge in return for human insights into biological diversity. The machine confluence contributes manufacturing capabilities in exchange for human creativity and innovation. What is the military significance of this alliance? Asked Fleet Commander Zareth. Unknown, Vextar admitted. But consider this. Each species in their alliance network contributes their greatest strengths to the collective knowledge base. Humanity alone possesses temporal manipulation weapons, matter disintegration technology, and infiltration capabilities that exceed our best stealth systems. He paused, letting the implications sink in. What capabilities might they possess when, combined with the advanced technologies of 30 other civilizations? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Kithara Empire had built its power through conquest, absorbing the resources and territories of defeated enemies. But they had never encountered an alliance where species willingly shared their most advanced technologies with each other. There is another factor, Vextar continued. During our visit to Earth, we witnessed the arrival of Veltar raiders, 3 heavy cruisers armed with singularity warheads. Several assembly members hissed in recognition. The Veltar hegemony was a known threat, one that even the Kithara Empire treated with caution. The humans neutralized all 3 ships without weapons fire, using temporal stasis technology. The entire engagement lasted approximately 30 seconds. Temporal stasis? Elder Prime Corthon leaned forward. That's theoretical technology. No one has successfully weaponized time distortion. The humans have. And they treated it as a routine defensive measure barely worth interrupting their dinner conversation. Vextar activated a new display, showing the analysis his staff had compiled over the past months. Based on our observations and intelligence gathered during our visit, we have identified the following human capabilities: temporal manipulation weapons, matter disintegration at ranges exceeding 50,000 kilometers, instantaneous infiltration of secured facilities, gravitational manipulation, and manufacturing capacities that could produce response fleets in a matter of weeks. And this represents their defensive systems, added Intelligence Officer Zirith, stepping forward to support her commander's presentation. We have no data on their offensive capabilities, because they saw no need to demonstrate them. War Master. Thekron stood again, his voice tight with frustration. Commander, are you recommending that the Kithara Empire surrender to these humans without a fight? No, War Master, Vextar replied calmly. I'm recommending that we reconsider what it means to be strong. The chamber fell silent. For 3,000 years, our empire has grown through conquest. We have absorbed weaker civilizations, claimed their resources, and expanded our territory. We have done this because it made us stronger. Vextar gestured to the star charts showing human alliance networks. But the humans have discovered something that makes conquest obsolete. They have learned that cooperation generates more strength than domination. That voluntary alliance creates more security than enforced submission. That sharing knowledge advances civilization faster than hoarding it. You're talking about abandoning our entire way of life, protested Governor Velkoth of the Outer Colonies. I'm talking about evolving beyond our current limitations, Vextar corrected. The humans offered us something unprecedented: friendship, alliance, a place in their cooperative network. What would such an alliance cost us? Asked Elder Prime Corthon. According to Admiral Chen, nothing but our hostility toward other species. They don't want tribute, territory, or subjugation, they want partners. And what would they offer in return? Vextar smiled, the first genuine expression of hope he had shown in months. Access to the accumulated knowledge of 30 civilizations, medical technology that could extend our lifespans, manufacturing techniques that could revolutionize our economy, scientific discoveries that could advance our understanding of the universe by centuries. He paused, looking around the assembled leadership of his species, and most importantly, security. Not the security of being the strongest predator in the galaxy, but the security of being part of something larger than ourselves. The debate that followed lasted for days. Factions formed and dissolved as different groups weighed the implications of Vextar's report. Military leaders argued for traditional responses, gathering intelligence, building weapons, preparing for eventual conflict. Economic advisors calculated the costs and benefits of both war and peace. Philosophers debated the nature of strength and the future of Kythera civilization. Through it all, Vextar found himself thinking not of grand strategies or tactical considerations, but of a human child named Emma, who had looked at armed alien warriors and seen interesting new friends. The final vote was closer than he had hoped, but decisive enough to change history. The Kythera Empire would seek alliance with humanity. The message from Earth came within hours of their decision being transmitted. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the communication screen, looking genuinely delighted by the news. Commander Vextar, we're thrilled to hear from you. The Alliance Council is very excited about the possibility of welcoming the Kythera Empire as partners. Alliance Council? Vextar asked. The governing body for our mutual cooperation agreements. Representatives from all our allied species, making decisions about joint projects, shared research, mutual defense, that sort of thing. Sarah's image was joined by others, beings from species Vextar didn't recognize, some humanoid, some definitely not, all looking pleased about the prospect of new allies. We'd like to invite a delegation from your empire to attend our next council meeting, Sarah continued. It's being held on Harmony Station in the Centauri system. We think you'd find it interesting. What would such a meeting involve? Getting to know each other mainly, discussing what your empire might contribute to our alliance and what benefits you'd be interested in receiving. We've prepared some preliminary proposals based on your technological capabilities and resource needs. The display shifted to show projects that made Vextar's eyes widen. Medical research that could eliminate genetic diseases common to his species, terraforming techniques that could make barren worlds habitable, energy systems that could power their civilization for millennia. All of this would be available to us, he asked. All of this would be developed together with you, Sarah corrected. That's how the alliance works. Every species contributes their strengths, and everyone benefits from the combined knowledge. The meeting on Harmony Station exceeded even Vextar's expanded expectations. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, incorporating architectural principles from dozens of different species into a structure that was both functional and beautiful. Gardens from Zenthari worlds provided peaceful spaces for contemplation. Ethereal meditation chambers offered experiences that expanded consciousness beyond normal limitations. Human recreational facilities demonstrated the species' talent for turning any activity into entertainment. But it was the people that impressed him most. Representatives from 37 different civilizations worked together with an efficiency that made the Kythera Empire's bureaucracy look primitive by comparison. There were no territorial disputes, no power struggles, no competitive hierarchies. Every decision was made through consensus, with each species' concerns given equal weight. It took us about 10 years to work out the process, explained Dr. Martinez, who served as humanity's primary representative to the Alliance Council. Turns out that most species are pretty reasonable when you approach them as partners rather than competitors. The discussions that followed reshaped Vextar's understanding of what the Kythera Empire could become. Their military expertise, so long focused on conquest, could be redirected toward peacekeeping and exploration. Their territorial administration experience could help newly spacefaring species establish interstellar governments. Their resource extraction capabilities could Support joint terraforming projects. We're particularly interested in your experience with long-range logistics, said a representative from the Aquatic Collective, a species that lived in the deep oceans of water worlds. Our expansion has been limited by the difficulty of maintaining supply lines across interstellar distances, and your biotechnology could revolutionize agriculture throughout the Alliance, added a plant-based intelligence from the garden worlds. We've been working on problems that your species solved centuries ago. By the end of the week-long conference, Vextar found himself looking forward to a future he had never imagined possible. Not the endless expansion of empire, but the boundless growth of knowledge. Not the security of supremacy, but the strength of solidarity. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years for the Kythera Empire to fully integrate into the Alliance network, and longer still for their society to adapt to the principles of cooperation over conquest. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when old instincts nearly overwhelmed new wisdom. But gradually, the change took hold. Kythera military forces became peacekeepers and explorers, using their tactical skills to mediate disputes and protect vulnerable colonies. Their territorial governors became administrators for joint terraforming projects, applying their experience with resource management to benefit multiple species. Their scientists began collaborating with researchers from across the galaxy, making discoveries that no single civilization could achieve alone. Most importantly, they learned something that had eluded them throughout their history of conquest. They learned how to make friends, and in a galaxy full of potential allies, that made them part of something far more powerful than any empire. A civilization that spanned the stars and grew stronger with every new member who chose cooperation over conquest. The apex predators had learned that there was something even more dangerous than being at the top of the food chain. There was being part of an ecosystem where everyone thrived together. Epilogue. 10 years later, Commander Vexitar, now Ambassador Vexitar, stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the newest and largest of the Alliance's cooperative ventures. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see representatives from over 60 civilizations working together on projects that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve. The station itself was a testament to what cooperation could accomplish. Kythera engineering provided the structural framework. Human innovation designed the living systems. Xanthari energy manipulation powered the entire complex. Ethereal consciousness provided the communication networks that allowed 60 different species to coordinate their efforts seamlessly. It was beautiful, efficient, and something that filled Vextar with a pride he had never felt during his military career. "Impressive, isn't it?" said a familiar voice. Vextar turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen approaching, though she now bore the insignia of Alliance Coordinator, the rotating leadership position that guided their ever-growing confederation. 10 years. Ego. I thought the Kythera Empire represented the pinnacle of civilization, Vextar admitted. We controlled 300 star systems, commanded the most powerful military force in our region of the galaxy, and were feared by every species we encountered. And now we're part of something that makes our old empire look like a child's sandcastle. Sarah smiled. Funny how cooperation turns out to be more powerful than conquest. Through the viewport, they could see the latest addition to the station, a research facility dedicated to studying temporal mechanics, jointly operated by human scientists and Kythera theorists, with contributions from 16 other species. The work being done there would advance their understanding of time itself, potentially opening doorways to discoveries that could benefit the entire galaxy. Sarah, Vextar said quietly, I have a confession to make. Oh? 10 years ago, when we first encountered humanity, we were terrified, not just of your weapons or your technology, but of what you represented. Which was? Proof that everything we believed about strength and survival was wrong. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I imagine that was difficult to accept. It was the most difficult thing our species had ever faced. We had built our entire civilization on the principle that power came from domination, that security came from being stronger than everyone else, that the only way to survive was to make sure everyone else was afraid of you. And then you met humans. And then we met humans, Vextar agreed, who showed us that real power comes from lifting others up instead of tearing them down. That true security comes from having allies who choose to stand with you. That the best way to survive is to make sure everyone else wants you to succeed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of dozens of species working together on projects that would reshape their understanding of the universe. You know what the strangest part is? Vextar continued. What's that? We're stronger now than we ever were as conquerors. The Alliance has capabilities that dwarf anything the old Cathra Empire could have imagined. We can terraform worlds in decades instead of centuries. We can defend entire star systems with technologies that make our old weapons look primitive. We can explore the galaxy with fleets that would have been impossible for any single species to build. But none of it feels like power the way conquest did. It feels like responsibility, like stewardship, like being part of something bigger than ourselves. Sarah's smile was warm with understanding. That's because it is bigger than ourselves. Every species in the Alliance contributes something unique, something that makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Is that what humans learned from all those years of fighting each other? That cooperation is stronger than competition? Actually, Sarah said, I think we learned that competition and cooperation aren't opposites. They're tools. Competition drives innovation, pushes us to be better, forces us to grow. But cooperation lets us build on that growth, share it, make it benefit everyone. She gestured toward the busy corridors of the station, where beings from across the galaxy worked side by side. We still compete. Human colonies compete with each other to develop better technologies. Cathra research teams compete to make breakthrough discoveries. Zenthari artists compete to create more beautiful energy sculptures. But we compete to contribute to something larger, not to dominate it. A chime sounded throughout the station, announcing the daily Alliance Council session. Representatives from across the galaxy would gather to discuss new proposals, coordinate joint projects, and welcome potential new members. Speaking of which, Sarah said, we have some interesting news from the exploration fleets. Oh, the Deep Explorer has made contact with a species calling themselves the hegemony of superior beings. Ring any bells? Vextar felt his scales shift color with amusement. Let me guess. They have the largest fleet in their region of space, they've conquered dozens of worlds, and they consider themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. That's them. Sound familiar? Remarkably so. What do they want? What they all want, initially. Tribute, surrender, acknowledgement of their superiority, the usual demands. And our response? Sarah's expression took on the same look Vextar had learned to recognize over the years. Not threatening, not aggressive, just quietly confident. Captain, Rivera is handling first contact. He's invited their leadership to dinner. Vextar couldn't help but laugh. Of course he has. They'll probably decline initially. Make threats, posture, maybe even fire a few warning shots. But eventually, curiosity will get the better of them. They'll want to know what they're dealing with. And then they'll discover what you discovered, what every species that joins the Alliance eventually learns. Which is? Sarah's smile was gentle but carried the weight of absolute certainty, that there's something far more dangerous than being the apex predator. Being part of an ecosystem where everyone thrives, Vextar finished. Exactly. As they made their way toward the Alliance Council chambers, Vextar reflected on the journey that had brought him from the war room of a Kithara flagship to the halls of the greatest cooperative venture in galactic history. 10 years ago, he had been a conqueror, a predator, a being who derived strength from the fear of others. Now he was something far more powerful, a friend. And in a galaxy where friendship was the ultimate force multiplier, that made him part of the most dangerous alliance the universe had ever seen. The hegemony of superior beings was about to learn what every would-be conqueror eventually discovered when they encountered the Alliance. Sometimes the most terrifying thing you can face isn't an enemy who wants to destroy you. Sometimes it's a friend who wants to save you from yourself. In the depths of space, aboard the Alliance vessel, Deep Explorer, Captain Marcus Rivera was already setting the table for dinner. After all, there were new friends to make, and in a galaxy full of potential allies, that was the most important work of all. The end.